Another day, another story. An arms race occurs when two or more countries increase the size and quality of military resources to gain military and political superiority over one another. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union is perhaps the largest and most expensive arms race in history. However, others have occurred, often with dire consequences. Welcome to Taboo Eminent Channel. Whether an arms race increases or decreases the risk of war remains debatable. Some analysts agree with Sir Edward Grey, Britain's Foreign Secretary at the start of World War I, who stated, "The moral is obvious. It is that great armaments lead inevitably to war." The term arms race typically refers to a competitive buildup of military capabilities between two or more nations, driven by a desire to outpace or surpass potential adversaries in terms of weaponry and military technology. During an arms race, nations strive to enhance their military strength, often in response to perceived threats or to gain a strategic advantage. Historically, arms races have been a prominent feature of international relations, particularly during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. The superpowers engaged in an extensive nuclear arms race, each seeking to develop and deploy more powerful and sophisticated nuclear weapons. Arms races can also extend beyond nuclear weapons to include conventional forces, technological advancements, and other military capabilities. The competition may be fueled by political tensions, security concerns, or a desire for geopolitical influence. The risk associated with arms races is that they can lead to an escalation of tensions, increased likelihood of conflicts, and a diversion of resources away from social and economic development. Efforts to control or prevent arms races have been made through arms control agreements and disarmament initiatives. These agreements aim to limit the quantity and types of weapons that nations can possess, promoting stability and reducing the risk of conflict. Despite such efforts, arms races continue to be a complex and challenging aspect of global security. Dreadnought arms race. With the Industrial Revolution came new weaponry, including vastly improved warships. In the late 19th century, France and Russia built powerful armies and challenged the spread of British colonialism. In response, Great Britain shored up its Royal Navy to control the seas. Britain managed to work out its arms race with France and Russia with two separate treaties. But Germany had also drastically increased its military budget and might, building a large navy to contest Britain's naval dominance in hopes of becoming a world power. In turn, Britain further expanded the Royal Navy and built more advanced and powerful battle cruisers, including the 1906 HMS Dreadnought, a technically advanced type of warship that set the standard for naval architecture. Not to be outdone, Germany produced its own fleet of Dreadnought-class warships, and the standoff continued with both sides fearing a naval attack from the other and building bigger and better ships. Germany couldn't keep up, however, and Britain won the so-called Anglo-German arms race. The conflict didn't cause World War I, but it did help to increase distrust and tensions between Germany, Britain and other European powers. Arms control efforts fail. After World War I, many countries showed an interest in arms control. President Woodrow Wilson led the way by making it a key point in his famous 1918 14-point speech, wherein he laid out his vision for post-war peace. At the Washington Naval Conference, 1921-1922, the United States, Britain and Japan signed a treaty to restrict arms, but in the mid-1930s Japan chose not to renew the agreement. Moreover, Germany violated the Treaty of Versailles and began to rearm. This started a new arms race in Europe between Germany, France and Britain, and in the Pacific between Japan and the United States, which continued into World War II. Nuclear arms race. Though the United States and the Soviet Union were tentative allies during World War II, their alliance soured after Nazi Germany surrendered in May 1945. The United States cast a wary eye over the Soviet Union's quest for world dominance as they expanded their power and influence over Eastern Europe, and the Soviet Union resented the United States' geopolitical interference and America's own arms buildup. Further fueling the flame of distrust, the United States didn't tell the Soviet Union they planned to drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, although the United States informed them they had created such a bomb. To help discourage Soviet communist expansion, the United States built more atomic weaponry. But in 1949, the Soviets tested their own atomic bomb, and the Cold War nuclear arms race was on. The United States responded in 1952 by testing the highly destructive hydrogen superbomb, and the Soviet Union followed suit in 1953. 4 years later, both countries tested their first intercontinental ballistic missiles, and the arms race rose to a terrifying new level. Cold War arms race heads to space. The Soviets' launch of the first Sputnik satellite on October 4, 1957, stunned and concerned the United States and the rest of the world, as it took the Cold War arms race soon became the space race. President Dwight D. Eisenhower tried to tone down the rhetoric over the success of the launch, while he streamed federal funds into the U.S. space program to prevent being left behind. After a series of mishaps and failures, the United States successfully launched its first satellite into space on January 31, 1958, and the space race continued as both countries researched new technology to create more powerful weapons and surveillance technologies. Missile gap. Throughout the 1950s, the United States became convinced that the Soviet Union had better missile capability that, if launched, could not be defended against. This theory, known as the missile gap, was eventually disproved by the CIA, but not before causing grave concern to U.S. officials. Many politicians used the missile gap as a talking point in the 1960 presidential election. Yet, in fact, U.S. missile power was superior to that of the Soviet Union at the time. Over the next 3 decades, however, both countries grew their arsenals to well over 10,000 warheads. Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cold War arms race came to a tipping point in 1962 after the John F. Kennedy administration's failed attempt to overthrow Cuba's premier Fidel Castro, and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev implemented a secret agreement to place Soviet warheads in Cuba to deter future coup attempts. After U.S. intelligence observed missile bases under construction in Cuba, they enforced a blockade on the country and demanded the Soviet Union demolish the bases and remove any nuclear weapons. The tense Cuban Missile Crisis standoff ensued and came to a head as Kennedy and Khrushchev exchanged letters and made demands. The crisis ended peacefully. However, both sides and the American public had fearfully braced for nuclear war and began to question the need for weapons that guaranteed mutually assured destruction. Arms races continue. The Cold War ended in 1991 following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall. But years earlier, in 1987, the United States and the Soviet Union had signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, INF, to limit the scope and reach of all types of missiles. Other treaties such as the START I Treaty in 1991 and the New START Treaty in 2011 aimed to further reduce both nations' ballistic weapons capabilities. The United States withdrew from the INF Treaty in 2019, however, believing that Russia was non-compliant. Though the Cold War between the United States and Russia is over, many argue the arms race is not. Other countries have beefed up their military might and are in a modern-day arms race or poised to enter one, including India and Pakistan, North Korea and South Korea, and Iran and China. Types of arms races. Nuclear arms race. One of the most famous examples is the Cold War nuclear arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both superpowers sought to develop and stockpile nuclear weapons, leading to an unprecedented buildup of arsenals. Conventional arms race. Besides nuclear weapons, nations may also engage in an arms race to enhance their conventional military capabilities. This could involve the development and deployment of advanced aircraft, tanks, naval vessels, and other conventional forces. Drivers of arms races. Security concerns. Nations often engage in arms races due to perceived threats from other countries. The desire for security and deterrence can drive military buildups. Geopolitical rivalries. Strategic competition and rivalries for regional or global influence can lead to an arms race as nations seek to establish or maintain their dominance. Technological advancements. The pursuit of cutting-edge military technologies can trigger arms races as nations compete to have the most advanced and sophisticated weaponry. Arms control and disarmament. Treaties and agreements. International efforts to curb arms races include treaties and agreements. Examples include the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT, and the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, START. Disarmament initiatives. Some nations engage in unilateral or multilateral disarmament initiatives to reduce their military capabilities voluntarily. Negative consequences. Economic burden. Arms races can divert significant resources away from social and economic development, impacting a nation's overall well-being. Tensions and instability. The competitive nature of arms races can contribute to heightened tensions between nations, potentially increasing the likelihood of conflicts. Humanitarian concerns. The development and deployment of advanced weaponry can have severe humanitarian consequences, especially in the case of weapons of mass destruction. Modern context. While the Cold War-era arms race was marked by the US-Soviet rivalry, contemporary arms races involve a broader range of nations. Countries in various regions, such as Asia and the Middle East, are involved in ongoing arms competitions. It's important to note that while arms races can be concerning, diplomatic efforts, arms control agreements, and international cooperation remain crucial in mitigating the risks associated with excessive military buildups. Technological innovations. Arms races often drive rapid technological innovations. The competition to outdo adversaries can lead to advancements in military technology, such as missile systems, radar capabilities, cyber warfare tools, and more. The pursuit of technological superiority can extend beyond traditional warfare to include domains like space and cyberspace, where nations aim to gain an edge in satellite technology, communication systems, and cyber capabilities. Proxy wars. In some cases, rather than engaging in a direct military conflict, nations involved in arms races might support proxy wars. They may provide military aid, funding, or weapons to allies or factions aligned with their interests in regional or global conflicts. Arms race in space. The militarization of space is a growing concern. Nations are developing technologies and capabilities to enhance their military presence in space, including satellite systems for communication, reconnaissance, and potentially offensive purposes. The possibility of an arms race in space has led to discussions about the need for international agreements to prevent the weaponization of space. Arms races and regional dynamics. Arms races are not limited to global superpowers. Many regional conflicts and tensions also contribute to localized arms races, where neighboring countries seek to maintain or gain military superiority. The South Asian region, for example, has witnessed an arms race between India and Pakistan, both nuclear-armed nations with historical tensions. Economic interests. The military-industrial complex plays a significant role in arms races. In some cases, economic interests and the desire to support domestic defense industries contribute to the perpetuation of military buildups. Governments may view the defense sector as a source of jobs and economic stimulus, which can influence decisions related to military expenditures. Arms control challenges. While arms control agreements aim to mitigate the risks of arms races, challenges persist. Treaty violations, lack of transparency, and the emergence of new technologies that may not be covered by existing agreements pose ongoing challenges. The withdrawal of certain nations from arms control treaties, as witnessed in recent years, raises concerns about the effectiveness of such agreements. Cyber arms race. The increasing reliance on technology in military operations has given rise to a cyber arms race. Nations are investing in cyber capabilities for both offensive and defensive purposes, engaging in cyber espionage, and developing strategies to counter potential cyber threats. Understanding and addressing the complexities of arms races require ongoing international dialogue, diplomacy, and a commitment to finding cooperative solutions that prioritize global security and stability. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.